convenient place. Okay, so in case you don't know me, I'm Geraldine Maury, and I'm a fashion futurist, designer, and educator. And I'm really happy you could join us for this hour. We have, like I said, 5 to 10 minutes at the end for questions, but we also have our Q&A tomorrow at 12 p.m. UK time for those of you who can join at that time. And the replay of this session will be on YouTube, available to everyone until the end of the month. So if you don't know me, I've been in the foresight industry specifically for over 10 years now, but I've actually been in the fashion industry since the late 90s. I used to be a designer and work for big brands in the US, but I'm actually from Paris. I'm a sort of bicultural. And almost a decade ago, I dedicated myself to my own independent relational practice. And I spend a great deal of time working with global innovation agencies and brands who hire me as a strategic partner. I also am a public speaker, but I've also in the past years really focused a lot on education, and I come from a family of educators. And so back several years ago, I started the Trend Atelier School. And then when these types of community platforms became available, it just made a lot of sense to start the community. Plus, there seemed to be a real growing need to come together as a foresight community. So the Trend Atelier, we're a very pragmatic community in the sense that we share a lot of really practical tools for the everyday needs of our members. Our members are generally foresight experts, but we also have a ton of designers. We have several artists, and we also have educators. But we also center the curation of what we do around quarterly themes, which are picked by the community at the end of each year. So Care Futures was actually a theme that we discussed, we surveyed, we shared, we chatted, and we picked this. So April marks the start of the second quarter, and Care Futures is a theme for the next 3 months. So we are happy to be able to share this with you. So today you're going to discover a format we haven't actually used before. We usually do a more sort of traditional foresight presentation format where we share a lot of insights mixed with interactive elements and educational elements. We sometimes have workshop activities within our future foresight presentations, but today we're bringing you into a story of the future. So today, here's the schedule. First, we'll talk about our methodology and how to use and how to apply what we're doing today. And then we'll go through 3 events that are set in 2032. So today, essentially, the methodology is something based on extensive research that's been carried out by myself, by Colleen, and also by Rumi Joseph, who's a forecaster I work with, but who's also a former Future Lab foresight expert, as well as now focusing mainly on working with Apple. But essentially today we're focusing on a speculative design methodology. And to quote Tina Gorjang, who actually created a speculative design lecture in one of my courses called Forecast Like a Futurist. Tina Gorjang, by the way, is amazing. You should look her up. She's a speculative design expert, but she's also a professor at CSM at Material Futures, and she also works with a number of really cool organizations. So it was really an honor to have her create this lecture for our course. But to quote her, she says, "Speculative design is a creative process that produces boundary-pushing prototypes and design systems for the future. Its main interest is to challenge social problems that seem unfixable within our current mentality by proposing drastic changes in our values, beliefs, attitudes, and behavior." And Anthony Doon, who's the co-creator of the discipline, he's been credited as sort of inventing the practice of speculative design, that defines design fiction as a potential genre of speculative design practice and critical design as a possible approach. And Tina Gorjank in her lecture continued on to say that speculative design tries to imagine what life would be like without the current limitations of today. But to be clear, today has nothing to do with science fiction. Corporations utilize science fiction techniques to imagine the future, but really speculative design is more about retaining the link between the present and the imaginary future by considering the domino effect of current events and really anchoring what we're telling you in current trend signals, current technologies, or perhaps current challenges. So, and the other thing that I really love about speculative design is that it focuses on how um, those events could impact the everyday of the future. So it's really about looking at an everyday event, an everyday moment, perhaps a moment in a life. Maybe you're making toast, or maybe you're quite specific. So it focuses on designing the relations around that event, around those objects, around those outputs. And essentially it's through those relations that you're able to map out what that world looks like in that moment. So rather than predicting a set future, it's really more about imagining possible futures. And so as part of today's presentation, we also looked at the Future Compass tool developed for the 2121 Futures Insight exhibition in Tokyo. It's being held at the moment, if any of you have the chance to be in Tokyo. It's directed by futurist Michiaki Matsushima, who's also the editor of Wired in Japan. But I just want to say that as a community, we care for our future, and speculative design is very much about empathizing with the future. And so this is why we use this technique for this particular future vision. It's always about empathy and putting yourself in either someone else's shoes or someone else's future's position. And this really enables you to depict the future from a place of a key player or a key stakeholder, someone who has an important role in that particular scenario. And speculative design is something that I've previously worked on with Plurality University, and for my blog through a creative collaboration I did with trend incubator Limbo and Hatch and digital artist Harriet Davey. So that's kind of to give you an idea of the methodology, which essentially blends very traditional trend research, future trend research that we've done with this type of storytelling aspect. But Care Futures is also designed in a way to help you think differently about the future and perhaps inform different areas of your work. So our prop today, because essentially when you work around speculative design, you're designing a prop, whether it's an object, whether it's a stage. You could do a speculative future designs scenario by, for example, creating a stage the way, for example, Studio Superflux in London does that. Well, they'll stage the apartment of the future, for example. So there are different ways of creating props, but our prop today is in the form of writing a story. And so this prop can be of value to your thinking across a range of roles. And it can be of value whether you're a forecaster or a designer, a journalist, a sustainability specialist, or a student. So we've created this format to explore different aspects of the future on a specific day, lived by 3 different people. And to quote Tina Gorjank again, and I just want to say, perhaps some of you know Tina Gorjank through her project, her Material Futures project, where she took DNA from Alexander McQueen and created leather out of it. Do any of you remember this project? It's about 8 years old. So yeah, that was created by Tina Gorjank. I see some people shaking their heads. But she said, the outputs of speculative design usually act as a tool of initiating a debate or change. They aim to spark critical thinking to either help set in place today's factors that will increase the probability of achieving more desirable futures, or spot early the factors leading to undesirable ones, which can be addressed in advance and limited She explains that there's several speculative design practices that are being used in intergovernmental and governmental organization. Companies like Visa, Pepsi, Ford, even NATO are using these techniques. And she's even talked about a particular instance, which was called the Pink Chicken Project, which was used by the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. And the project essentially created a relatable scenario for 196 governments, NGOs, science organization, educational organizations to explore the potential of engineered genes and how this might become legal. So what's interesting about speculative design is that it can definitely explore social problems that seem too big to fix, or these types of wicked society problems. And it's a great way also to avoid the blind spots that sometimes we have within forecasting. So in terms of applying this to your work, you can use it for future strategies. Scenarios are building scenarios, a very common way of approaching future forecasting. It's an excellent tool for framing strategies and innovation. Some people even use the technique of backcasting, where they might imagine a future scenario, or perhaps even in a somewhat biased way, a place, a future they want to have, and work their way backwards in terms of how they might want to create it. But again, to quote Tina, because obviously we have the lecture in the school, it's not about predicting the future, but about asking the questions. And I think that's such an important point. By asking questions to which we have no answers, we can start imagining alternative futures that are not in line with the currently predicted trajectory of our society. Then when it comes to future products and services, within speculative design, you could explore designing products or services or various touch points with key stakeholders, explore ways how this could benefit people, benefit citizens, benefit even perhaps a brand, whilst tackling some of the bigger problems faced by either society or industries. And and it's very much a technique of zooming in and out. So for example, zooming into a very specific everyday life event, and then zooming out in terms of how that relates to the bigger issues in a society. And for powerful narratives for design and with design, meaning using design as a tool, the stories we tell about design and with design have the power to speak to individuals and communities. So scenarios offer a chance to speculate what stories we want to tell and futures we want to create. But make no mistake, even though this is speculative, the output can be incredibly tangible. So that's essentially it. But the output in this everyday scenario could be infographics, services, sound games, a number, situations, policy. Is quite diverse. So that kind of sums it up for our methodology. So today we're going to explore 3 events that are set on the 19th of April, 2032. And one thing I'd like to finish when it comes to the methodologies, which is that speculative design strength in comparison to traditional foresight is that it's really about identifying with the future and empathizing with the future. So the props trigger emotions, they trigger your imagination, they call upon you to use your imagination as a muscle around a specific experience or a situation that has to do with everyday life. And so a prop is not something fake. Obviously, it's manufactured by us, it's created by us, but it's still within the context of things that are happening today. And this is what's key about speculative design, is that it still needs to reference existing technologies or science or events to allow still for a type of realistic forecasting or suggestion to happen. And so I'd like to say also that for us, it's also about the notion of something that one of our favorite articles that we looked at the very beginning of when we started out as a community, which is a piece called Defuturing the Image of the Future. In this piece, in this article on walkerarts.org, um, they quote Tony Fry, who talks about defuturing. And I'll just quote him. He says, "We need to remind ourselves that the future is never empty, never a blank space to be filled with the output of human activity. It is already colonized by what the past and present have sent to it. Without this comprehension, without an understanding of what is finite, what limits reign, and what directions are already set in place, we have little knowledge of futures, either of those we need to destroy or those we need to create." And he talks about design's propensity to defuture, which is rooted in its capacity to fulfill present wants with little attention to future needs. So essentially, this is also the idea that when we're forecasting the future, we're essentially already colonizing our future. So we always have to ask ourselves, whose future are we also trying to predict? So these are our three scenarios today. Commuting to school will be the first one. The second one, created by Colleen, is called the Hope Factory. And the third one is the community custodian. So welcome to our journey. Our journey starts now. So commuting to school. I'll start reading you the story of commuting to school. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay, great. Oh, I have to put my reading glasses on. Hi, my name is Arthur. I'm 9 years old. It's 8 a.m. in Helsinki on April 19th, 2032. I'm off to school and just completed my morning meditation, exploring my unconscious bias towards robotic birds. They freak me out. I know they're needed since the event, but I have issues with robots. They make me feel sad. I've been doing these meditation sessions, especially since mom went to crypto rehab. She was part of one of the first crypto powered DAOs, and it messed up her mental health. She started seeing effects about 2 years ago. They took a while to set in, but when the mental burnout and the dissociation kicked in, she wasn't able to look after me. So I had to kind of grow up fast and do all this resilience stuff they teach you at school today. I'm off to school actually right now with my care partner. My father, he's already off to work. He's getting trained for home care. It's a new law that was put in place since the great pandemic of the 2020s. There was too much burden on women to provide care, so work schedules in my city have been changing accordingly, and men have been taking on more care functions in society. In my city, there's been heavy investment of public funds in childcare and elder care services because it has been seen as more effective in reducing public deficits and debt than austerity policies. Dad is trying real hard, and I think when my carer doesn't need to be with me anymore, I'll still feel sad. They were assigned to me by Reunion Network, and they're really cool. They're also helping me with my projects at Agora and my civics training, because in 3 years, I'll be able to vote. A law was passed that 12-year-olds could vote in my city. It has made headlines around the world. Our mayor believes if children could vote, the world would be a better place. She ran on the premise that older populations in developed countries need to allow children to have their voice and their say, as we need the youth to lead. It's been part of a broader approach to the care and respect of children's voices in how we care for our futures. Part of a whole new constitutional and civic process, but there have been many safeguarding measures to be put in place, and it's being rolled out over a couple of years, I guess, but it's still a controversy about it, and it's been hard for my family. I want to vote for the Care Society Party, but my uncle is an old school Labor voter and it's been dividing us. He doesn't take me seriously. He doesn't understand new ways. And when I was 5, I was able to choose my gender on my passport. So what's his problem? I'm tired of adults complicating everything. I have a lot to say and a lot of plans to make this world a place that cares. The Care Society Party believes children, trees, and animals have a voice. So actually, I've decided I want to be a care designer when I'm older. And my care is helping me because they've been through a lot of gender discrimination against non-binary people. So I'm inventing a new hospital system. And in fact, it's not going to be called a hospital system. I just call it like that so people get it. But I've already figured out the design, but not the name quite yet. My Agora School mentor has introduced me to things like chromotherapy and modular care, as well as natural aesthetics of care. My uncle, of course, he rolls his eyes when I talk about this. Well, I know about the new aesthetics of care because there was such a crisis in healthcare when I was still just born that a movement to make healthcare move away from the clinical, you know, environment that we had started to prevail. So I learned at school things that shocked me that, for example, an investment of 2% GDP in the caring industries was predicted to generate up to 1 million jobs in Sweden. So care economics boost employment, earnings, economic growth, and help foster gender equality. And just because I'm 9 doesn't mean I can't engineer a new system. It's the adults who are stupid. My care system will include natural aesthetics, like I said, but the use of psychedelics, materials such as mycelium bricks and 3D printed sugarcane partitions, which are known to be less toxic and biodegradable. And in fact, at Agora, we have Greta supporting us on this. She's a guest mentor now. So, the thing is that my mom, she struggled. Social media, metaverse information bombardment, all she was doing was producing content and incentivized by crypto in her DAO. And it was just too much for her human brain, even though she loved it. So my future hospital has a big focus on mental health, setting people at ease, mitigating anxiety, creating a certain level of intimacy. There will even be a stimuli reintroduction therapy with Sensix stations. Those were invented during the pandemic and have become widespread. I really want it to be a meditative and a place and reinforce the mind as well as resilience. People will have intuition therapy where they learn to reconnect with their gut. Therapies will come through dream curation. Dreams will be recorded with the help of a new AI that can create a dream map and make them talk to each other to extract problematic thoughts and neurological patterns. It's had great success with people even showing early signs of dementia. There will be departments for repairing and replacing broken body parts, wearables and prosthetics and robotics that don't freak me out, actually. It will be modular care with programs that are tailored to an individual's needs. And virtual sessions with your doctor will be available for people who can't afford these real life therapies. So the metaverse, it's not all bad. It's just that some people prefer the real deal, but that does come at a higher cost. And my uncle hates it all. He says it's all for rich people living in a gated post-pandemic world. And it's true. I live in the gated side of the city and daddy has money. But I say I'm the future, and my uncle's generation has made a mess of it. And if it was up to me, I'd strip him of his redemption credits. Anyway, I have to go now. My reunion care has to go, and my Agora mentor is waving at me. So I'll see you later. That's the end of event 1. And I just want to specify that we'll be releasing all the research that we have, obviously, for all of the scenarios, and that will be part of what we share with you at the end of this session. But I'll pass on to Colleen now. But before I do that, actually, I just want to share a wild card of the future. So, and that's what if, it's cancel culture, right? So, but what's a society without redemption? So what if we had a society where you had redemption credits? Just a thought. But so now on to Colleen. Colleen, I will pin you.
Thank you.
So that you take over.
The Hope Factory. It's 2032. The day is April 19th, Oslo. It's 9 a.m. and spring is in the air. I'm on my way to the Hope Factory. It's warm out. I try and remember a moment in time when the weather was cooler. A vague memory of damp, fresh spring mornings from when I was a child come up. Sure was a long time ago. Things have changed quite drastically since then. I look up at the sky and see a gaggle of mechanical geese flying above the park path I'm on. The new government started building these robotic birds and insects a couple of years back to counter the event. All of a sudden, bees, among many other species, had disappeared. I remember reading about how back in 2022, out of the 60 million that had already disappeared by them, the event had been so sudden and completely unpredicted. It left most of the world in shock. That's when the robotic replacements had come in. Bees to replace the practically extinct species so as to continue spreading pollen among surviving plants, geese and other birds to spread seeds, fertilizers, and other necessities, to reintroduce green spaces, and inspire what was left of the wilderness back into human-occupied spaces. They say they made them look very lifelike, but I couldn't really remember the last time I saw a live one. Still quite a recent strategy. There are still some around, but they're rare, and most of them are currently being kept in these new facilities like the Ark. They had been built in a rush in an attempt for survival and conservation. I heard from someone in the community that they were trying to find a way to help them adapt to more recent climates so they could fare for themselves later on down the line. Climates become so erratic in the last decade that most plants and animals that used to grow and roam around couldn't rely on their natural cycle and were disappearing. We ourselves as a species were endangered. With the bees gone and pollination having become an issue, this had caused shortages around the globe. Just as during COVID pandemic, countries were all impacted in different ways by climate change, all at different stages. Preserving the food chain and as many of the species we could had become the only answer, and countries had to unite worldwide. All countries and continents had to face the fact that they couldn't go on with the individualistic and competitive government models they'd been following. They'd simply had to put differences aside and work together. That's when it all started to shift. The world came together and set up a plan towards a better future. The long-term goal and transition towards it was put into place, and life as we'd known it had shifted. A complete restructure of all systems supervised by all countries, working hand in hand. One of the new decrees that had come with this reform was a quarterly visit to the Hope Factory. Every commune has one. Placed at the center of a green space, the short walk serves as a preliminary to what we call the cure. Every citizen of the Earth is required to get the cure as part of a support system during the transition towards 2062, the year we should normally have reached our sustainability goal by. The government's transition model was such a drastic and extreme one due to the severity of the current situation that its implementation was putting tremendous stress on the population. Suicide rates were skyrocketing. That's when the concept of the Hope Factory is first brought up and put into action. The Hope Factory might be in this green haven, however, construction lies all around. Most of the construction that built cities of the past were severely damaged due to critical weather conditions brought around by climate change. A huge transition effort led by the Green New Deal has been implemented in rebuilding our living spaces. Rewilding and thinking long-term, building off of history and what we know now about the importance of staying connected to nature. We started retrofitting the buildings that had shown themselves to be durable enough, as well as erecting new formatted buildings. The factory itself is built of mycelium bricks. Scientists found the solution to fortifying them so that the material could support the pressure of a full construction just a couple of years ago. It had immediately been implemented and used to erect new buildings and structures because of its environmental benefits such as being regenerative and naturally insulating. The architectural group I work with is one of the ones to have participated in the development of the new material. I'd originally studied design and architecture, but chose to reskill and learn about new alternative materials. It was definitely one of the best choices I'd made. People working around sustainability and alternative designs are very in demand at the moment. All new constructions are being retrofitted to compensate for economic scarcity. New city plans inspired by the concept of permaculture have been drawn. You think of 19th century Paris with Haussmann tearing down the cramped and chaotic labyrinth of slum streets, knocking down buildings and clearing space, except this time it's nature we're bringing back to the cities. The COVID-19 pandemic had really set the light on the necessity of green space for people's well-being and mental health. I arrive in front of the Hope Factory. A friendly face welcomes me, and the door slides open. The pheromones sprayed throughout instantly make me feel calm and settled. The interior of the factory would be impossible to describe, as it was a new form of adaptive architecture, changing shades and colors to fit what the client or patient would find most soothing. I go straight to the pods in the center of the dome-shaped room, settle in, and scan my finger on the armrest. My metaverse avatars all pop up. It's nice to have them all together in this one space. Rare are the times we all get to gather. I smile, looking at all these virtual facets of my personality come together. Funny little things they are. While I go through the cure, my avatars will each be assigned to their AI care and go through their therapy session. This intimate moment of hope therapy and care for my avatars brings us closer and builds trust between us. We feel safe. Mental health has become a top priority in rebuilding the New World. Some movements against the Hope Factory claim them to be dehumanizing. They argue that eradicating stress and numbing down negative feelings simply isn't what nature intended for us, that it's necessary for us to feel the full spectrum of emotions available to us, that it's polarizing. But then, nature hadn't intended for us to exterminate most of the plant and animal kingdom either, didn't it? They silently protest through the metaverse, leaving virus tracts around. But the groups are small, or so I think they are. The media don't give them much attention. The new government won't allow potentially stressful information to be spread too much. Well-being is prioritized. The opposition claim the hope factories are part of government hope propaganda. I don't give it much thought, though. The world has never felt so serene, even amidst all this reconstruction. What could seem as chaos of construction towards this new sustainable era feels calm and manageable. You feel united with your community, working towards one same goal, so surely, propaganda or not, it can't all be that bad. Criminality is close to zero. Inspired by neighboring Norway's past prison system and rehabilitation programs, criminals are now sent to hope boot camps in this intensive aisle of the Hope Factory. There, they go through a vigorous therapy and a socializing training, a complete reprogramming of their inner anger and frustration, which usually leads them to becoming model citizens. I sit back, plug in, and let the cure do its thing. And that's it. That was the Hope Factory.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. So the wild card would be, what if your avatar needs therapy in 2032? So, okay, well, we'll move on to our third event. And I will pin myself. So our final and third event of 2032, April 19th. It's 8 a.m. I'm in Helsinki, and today is April 19th, 2032. Since fleeing the UK due to flooding, I've joined the ranks of climate refugees. I'm 39 and now have been here for a year. I've been working hard as a community custodian, fanning out the distributed cooperative building system I created back in London. It's been a massive undertaking to set this up in Helsinki, and I'm feeling under-resourced and underpaid. I really believe in the care economy, but the direction it's taking is still mostly benefiting the privileged, and that was never my mission, but I can't give up. Back in 2021 at Gallery Brita Redberg in Berlin, I saw an exhibit called On Survival. I'll never forget what it said, which was so central to the type of community architecture and work I was creating. It said, coexistence seems to be among the most pressing issues in need for a radical rethinking, both on a planetary and molecular scale. On Survival addresses the ambiguities and tensions behind contrasting modalities of human subsistence, and in particular, their tendency towards mutual care and solidarity, or self-preservation and society withdrawal. So today, I guess some things have worked and others are still in the works. I was able to develop the principle and foundations of the distributed cooperative, this idea of the home and the building as a living system, almost like a microbiome. And within the living system, helped scale a deep mind and material futures collaboration at Central St. Martin's by Prima Nontakau and George Dunham. And at the time, it was the first UK council operated AI system that was capable of identifying and recycling 100% of plastic waste and manufacturing everyday essentials for the most vulnerable in society, in our case, our neighborhood. And then the waste exchange that Rachel Taylor had invented, well, she helped me set this up and allowed our neighborhood to live off a new currency also being manufactured with the help of our AI from our local waste. So the idea grew in popularity, and it came at a time when community projects such as the Pattern Project's Microfactory in South London were showing the possibilities of what could happen locally, even down to what could happen in a building, depending on the resources retrofitted to that structure. Then back then, the idea of fashion commons was also taking hold. So as we enter the 2030s, there was a global ban on fossil fuel subsidies and the use of coal, and all new cars had to be electric. So these actions began to bear fruit, and oil demand really dropped. And there was a major focus on making agriculture carbon positive. But then the event happened early 2030. My home was destroyed by floods, along with 80% of my neighborhood, and I had to start over in Helsinki. I was accepted as a climate refugee because of my achievements in the UK and Sweden's interest in self regulation communes and my distributed cooperative work. And with temperatures rising, the increase in flooding and food scarcity and the transition, the great transition, my concept of buildings and communes fit well with the resilience model countries and localities were rushing to enact. So, along with our AI system that was capable of identifying, recycling, manufacturing, and even making currency in our building, we're now allocating a section of the building for 3D printable food, which has been funded by the UN, the Gates Foundation, the Weekend, well, he's retired from singing now, and local authorities. And if this works, it will be scaled worldwide. And I have to say, we aim to be mindful because this food we're printing, it does deserve respect and is now seen as a key interface. It's not just nutrients. We understand that it's a form of therapy. Food is a living organism, but we at the moment live in a heat or eat world of poverty and geopolitical hoarding, even though countries are still trying to unite. So we have no choice but to scale food printing as fast as we can. I guess with all this, when I talk about this, I guess you could say when it comes to being a refugee, I've had opportunities like no other, but I still feel displaced and I still grieve my past life and I guess the world I once knew. Someone asked me recently, what is this caring city or caring architecture you're building? Well, it's not on my own. Obviously, we're a community and I'm paid via the government, the building's waste currency, as well as from refugee NFTs and funding that come from around the world. I had read once about caring cities and infrastructures of care during a conference in 2021 by Future Architecture. So many ideas around the economy of care were taking hold at the time as we were fighting our way through a pandemic. I read on one of their sessions called The Landscape of Care. Designers, architects, and urban planners are increasingly taking on the task of managing social and political issues of relationships, neighborhoods, energy flows, mobility, cultural heritage, identity, and urban change, rather than just spatial and formal aspects. The theme, Landscapes of Care, focuses on a change of direction in the values, interests, and priorities that drive architecture and urban planning. The main focus changes from the individual actor or the individual object towards a greater sensitivity to issues of interconnection, attachment, and interdependence. So I guess that sums up my vision to this day. But I would say the gap in my work this is the setup still for the older population. I'm working with Reunion Network around this, as well as a young fellow I met who has insane ideas around the future hospital and is brilliant. He's only 9, but I think his ideas could work, and children are a key part of rebuilding society now. But here are the challenges we're still faced with: reaching 100% circularity. Number 2, hybrid work, where we really need to rely on this to help run our communal features for our building and our neighborhood. The rollout of universal base income, which also enables we can successfully run our distributed commune. And obviously, last but not least, the scarcity of natural resources. And for this, we're looking at seed preservation within our building and other forms of vertical and indoor farming. But certainly the wider adoption of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance and the growth of the care workforce has really helped my work gain momentum. Anyways, it was nice chatting with you. And if you want to fund my work, just go to Refugee Crypto and look me up. My NFT is called Refuge. Simple. So the wild card here is, what if your currency was made from your building's waste? So this sums up our three scenarios. And before we go to our time for questions and answer, I just want to say for our members of the community that, because this is the presentation we share with everyone in the community, but don't forget that May 4th, we have a speculative design workshop with Clarice Garcia, and everyone who isn't in the community. Clarice Garcia is a forecaster who's developing a PhD, and she is also running these workshops for everyone. And if you look her up on LinkedIn, you can see that she's at the moment promoting various workshops she's doing for her PhD research on new and innovative ways of doing future forecasting. And she herself consults with the Future Lab and Google and a number of agencies. And then on May 17th, we have, in terms of our Care Futures theme, we have a panel discussion with Stephanie Thomas, who's a pioneer in styling for people living with a disability. And she's the founder of Curatable. But your bonus resource will be on this link. It's not finished, so please give us the time to add all of the links, because there is a lot of research that is involved in developing these scenarios, but at least you have the link. And if you can just check back at the end of tomorrow UK time, so like 5 or 6 UK time, but at least you have the link right now. There's a few things in there already, but it'll be finished tomorrow. So that sums it up. But thank you, everyone, for today. And we have time for Q&A. But if we also obviously have our session to kind of go more into conversations and discussions tomorrow. And we decided to dedicate more time to Q&A as part of this Futuring series. But anyone would like does anyone have any questions or anything come up? Christina?
I'll just ask a quick question. How did you decide on 10 years out instead of 20 or 15? Like, what was there a reason for the decision? Did you backcast or something like that?
We felt like we felt like what is far enough that we could see a difference, because obviously technology is getting faster and faster, but that it's still approachable and not too far away. And then we also thought that much of the goals and the deadlines for the IPCC reports or sustainable development goals are often around 2030, or like sustainability commitments of brands. So we thought we could like put it a few years after that. And then a 10-year period is usually maybe more palatable and feels more within reach. And I thought if we do like 2045, maybe people will be like, well, I don't know how I can relate to that. But 2032 still feels like close enough. So,
Yeah, I love the way you wove everything together, and it just made so much sense. Like you could completely imagine these scenarios, at least in Helsinki. I mean, I think in
Yeah.
Barcelona it would be different where I am, but it seemed really like what I think, being somebody who's never been to Helsinki but knows that there's so much innovation happening there in terms of society, that it seemed quite plausible, even
Yeah,
though.
we picked the Scandinavian country because of that. We thought which place in the world is more likely to pilot these ideas. And
Right.
so that's why we picked Sweden. It could have been Norway or or Denmark actually would have been a really good one.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah. I see. Do you have anything else you wanted to ask? Otherwise, I'm going to read through the chat. Um, but I see some questions. I'm just gonna. Anush says, I really appreciate the vulnerability of each of these futures. And then I just scroll down. Uh, how do you use these scenarios, Julia Makalova? Um, speculative design is used to create a future scenario that is either plausible or unlikely or possible. Depends how far out you're predicting it, and in the sort of the cone of the timeline of the future. So if you can see a cone, it opens. So say your timeline is quite close at the bottom of the cone. Maybe you're using more things that are happening today, but the farther out you go in your cone and the more you open up, the more you need to use perhaps things that just haven't happened yet, and really use the idea of imagining possibilities. And so you use these future scenarios to place make things that are already happening, and then see them as perhaps a domino effect. Like, what if these things happen together? What is the domino effect? And then you set it in a real situation. And so it enables companies, individuals, governments, or to essentially stress test or fan out ideas, possible scenarios, work out possible solutions around big problems through very specific issues. Like, for example, if someone were, and this is real, like, for example, 5 years ago, I was in Dubai as part of Dubai 10X. Dubai was planning their infrastructure for the next 10 years. As you know, Dubai has very ambitious plans. They usually have very futuristic buildings. And so in this particular case, we were looking at our project was funded by the government. It wasn't my project. I was brought on to a project. It was by Hackmasters. They were running the project, but it was key stakeholders in the travel industry, more specifically the Dubai airport. And the Dubai airport is the biggest has the most travelers in the world. It's a huge hub at the time before the pandemic. And on that year, I was seeing 96 million visitors a year. And it was a huge fashion shopping destination, which is one of the reasons I was brought in as a fashion expert. But essentially, we use speculative design scenarios that were obviously created and managed by Hackmasters. I didn't create anything, but they tried to project us in these futures and imagine what would happen. And out of that came actual real services and products that you will see in the Dubai airport, because they mix futurists with people working for the airport, and then try to stress test different possibilities. So that's kind of a long explanation. I tried to use like a real life example. I hope that answers your question, Anush. No, sorry, Julia. And then, yes, I will share the link. Absolutely. I'll share the link in the chat again for the bonus resource. Um, Flavia, to answer your question, they happen in Scandinavian countries because these are usually countries that tend to be more adventurous with social change and piloting new ideas. For example, Denmark, they teach empathy in primary school, and they have very innovative prison system. It's by far not they're not perfect societies. No, nobody's perfect, but we try to set it in a place that perhaps would be more warm to these some of the ideas we had. And then I'm just trying to see if there are any other questions. Am I missing anything? Um, yeah, exactly. Nayara said, you know, if this is happening in the Nordic countries, I can't even imagine what is the situation in developing countries having all the issues mentioned in these scenarios in mind. Yeah, and we did a very quick run, you know, like this is 10 minutes reading per scenario. But if we had more time, like for example, the workshops that Hackmaster do last days, in fact, Nayara, you were part of these workshops. And Nayara here has worked with Hackmasters because she used to work with women in tech.
Women of Wearables, Timberlake.
Yeah, yeah. And um so yeah, we would explore that. And I tried to touch on that with the scenario about the 9-year-old where it says, you know, this is for rich people, because there is this whole theory at the moment in writing around reality privileges. Some people think that the metaverse will be more for the commoners and real life experiences will be for more privileged people. So yeah, obviously we can already see today that some, you know, some big disparities in the world. So that's another scenario we could explore. How long did it take for you to research and formulate these? Um, the the research takes time and it's ongoing. Uh, Rumi, Colleen, and I met over a day. They already knew about the theme. We had research, and then we powwowed about it, and we just went back at it and spoke a few times. We have a shared document. So this was done over a month ago. The community also shares insights for each future theme. We have a shared space. So sometimes we pull from that as well, and in some cases, even in some presentations, we'll have a community member speak. But because I write quite often and I love this kind of writing, once the research is there and once you've sort of drafted the key ingredients of the story, and Pamela could probably speak to this because Pamela here is actually an author and is a science fiction writer. So Pamela, who's joining us from New Zealand, but personally, I try to just put in the key ingredients. And what I did also is I kept re-referencing our actual research to make sure I wasn't like going too far. And then, but the writing took less than a day, and I think it's the same for Colleen. And then Colleen, I didn't give her enough time to review what I had written because I've been a bit against the gun lately. But Colleen and I then also exchange about her scenario asynchronously through Google Docs and things like that. So
To give it
yeah.
time, I think it took me about 2 hours to write the scenario,
Yeah.
something like that, counting the reviewing.
But I want to preface that Colleen is an excellent writer, and that like she reads a book for breakfast. Like she's not normal. Her family don't watch TV together. Sorry, I'm oversharing. Colleen, they read books. Like they'll sit down all together and they read. They're avid readers. So if you're not someone who tends to write a lot, I would say like give yourself some more time, but stick to it, because the more you write, the more just the easier it comes. And I never used to write this fast. It's only because I write often that it's, and I think it's the same for Colleen. I don't know if Pamela, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have any tips when you come up with a story set in the future?
Oh, that's funny. I was just about to type in that writing is a muscle that, you know, just like you exercise your physical body, it's a muscle to exercise every day. And I mean, 800 words is a bit of a reach, but I when I'm not actually working on a project, I'll try to shape 800 words over a day or two, like to make myself come to a conclusion with my writing, because I think that's one of the hardest things, where you can work through research and start working with ideas, but then to find yourself in those ideas is the thing that takes the real grunt. So yeah, my tip is write as often as you can. But something that interested me about all your scenarios, I found myself thinking that how I would think of it too is what would break it. I started thinking, whoa, wow. Especially I think the Hope Center one, where I was very interested to think how might someone use that in all sorts of different ways. I found that really fascinating and engaging. Yeah, so that's another thing about reading, is to be a good writer, start interrogating what you read as well, which is probably what you do, Colleen.
And actually, that's something that Tina talks about in her lecture about speculative design. She says, what I try to do to make sure I stay is similar to what you said, to make sure I'm not overly influenced by my own biases. I try to take the opposite view or tell the story from someone who's completely outside, or it's her way also of breaking the story. But thank you for sharing that, Pamela. I've just put the resource link in the chat for everyone. If you can just copy and paste it, because we're coming to a close for today. But if you have more questions, or if things come up today and you have time to join us, even if it's not for the whole time, we have our Q&A tomorrow at 12, and that's it. And we'll be in touch also, because our community is reopening. So for anyone who may want to join, please check your inboxes, because there will be a short window, and sometimes things land in the junk mail. So please check your mail. But thank you everyone for joining today. It was really, really great to have everyone here. Thank you, Colleen. And also thank you to Nayara for helping organize all of this.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Geraldine, it was like you took my Feedly trend bucket and you put it into 3 stories.
It's a bit mind-blowing indeed.
Yes. It's like, I mean, I've been to so many speculative design sort of workshops and things through IED, and it's all really great, but I've always seen it develop over such, it's like a month and it's super intense. So seeing you do it all like this in one workshop and come up with these 3 really strong scenarios, it was just very exciting.
I'm fascinated with the techniques of design sprints that are used in the tech industry, and I think we should use them more in design and fashion, any form of any design practice. Or I mean, obviously we are researching on an ongoing basis, so it's not completely out of the blue. Like, there's work done in the background, but I feel like sometimes you just have to give yourself a time frame and then just put it out, because nothing's going to be perfect anyways.
Right.
So like Pamela was saying, maybe give yourself 800 words. In this sense, we said, okay, we're going to talk about it for 10 minutes. It's going to be an event. But when we were doing Cure Futures and we were coming up with the research and some of them quite utopian ideas, we felt like we had no choice but to do a speculative design scenario. But you've seen other presentations that we've done. It's not always that. But in this case, I guess we wanted people to really feel like, oh, wow, this could actually happen. Like, or this could be me. Even with the dark stuff, And that was the other thing. We wanted to take a balanced approach and not just only always talk about the wonderful things, but also see how like this world is a mixture of things.
Mm,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
It's fun. I hope you try it out, because speculative design, writing stories, even short stories, is really fun. Actually, it's a great way of engaging with your creativity.
Yeah, I think it just should just be taught at a very young level. Like when Colleen was reading, I was like, oh, she should I would love her to write that story as a children's story, like how beautifully illustrated that could be, you know?
Actually, the VNA here during the design London Design Week, they had a whole section where they had us class. I forgot which school it was in England. Create all these separate speculative scenarios
Mm.
around recycling systems, all sorts of things. They drew, they did charts. It was really great. I have photos of it. Actually, that reminds me, I should look that up for as an
Yeah, I had no
example.
idea they'd done that.
Yeah, yeah, it was really great. It was really, really cool. Um, so, well, thank you. It was great to see everyone, and let you go. Wish we could stay longer, but gonna head off now, and then hopefully see you tomorrow if you can. Bye. Bye.